We are going to move to another critical issue, especially as it concerns the issue of war crimes being committed, way too many of them being committed all over the world, unfortunately. And another subset that has been getting a lot of news here in the United States is, of course, what has been happening in the Caribbean, these strikes on so-called drug boats, and a September 2nd attack that not only killed 11, but there was a double tap, a follow-on strike on survivors. Obviously, a war crime here, a lot going on, a lot of discussions in Congress. So to get into all of this and more, we are very, very happy to be joined here by Greg Stoker, who is a U.S. military veteran and also the host of the Colonial Outcasts podcast. Greg, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. You guys ready for the global war on terror 2.0? It's about to ramp up.
Oh God. Oh
Yeah,
God.
I mean, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
But it's coming. I think whether we like it or not. Obviously, this attempt to really ratchet things up in Latin America is one of the key fronts there. And I guess Hegseth comes out and he says he starts to pass the buck and he says, it's the fog of war. Who knows what happened? But whatever happened, I'm in favor of what happened. Today, some Congress people coming out saying the video they've seen of this September 2nd strike is, one of the, more disturbing things. I think Jim Himes said that they've ever seen. But I mean, just give us a sense, Greg, maybe for people who are sort of hearing a lot of this, like, why is this a war crime? I mean, I hate to say it like that, but I feel like, a lot of times things are thrown around. People look at it, they don't know what's going on. There's a lot of attempts to muddy the waters about what's happening here with these boats and the so-called legality of it. So what are we really looking at here in terms of lawlessness in the U.S. military in the Caribbean?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, I've learned that good leadership is throwing your subordinates under the bus. I learned this during my mandated warfighter ethos training. Thank you, Pete Hegseth, for making me a better leader. So I'll just I follow a lot of like military accounts and mill blogger accounts, and like the entire like defense community is incredibly demoralized, because it's very clear what's happening. He's throwing the commander of Special Operations Command, under the bus completely. And he's throwing them under the bus because they are scared legally. Now, if you look at it, like a lot of I'm going to directly address like the pro bombing boats arguments, that are coming from like right wing military accounts and commentators. They're like, they use the global war on terror as an example, specifically when it comes to land strikes. So, drone strikes, close air support, you can fire on a target, and this is their argument. And then if the target is still moving, if it's still alive, you can fire again. And no one's really going to challenge that. You could argue like the ethics behind it, obviously, but no one's really going to prosecute that. However, maritime law, this is like going back to ancient laws of the sea. You can't strike down, you can't do follow-on attacks or double taps or triple tap strikes on boats. You just like, this has been established. This is not a lawyer, but this is like basic stuff that you learn like the first week of military basic training. What is a war crime? What can't you do? And this is one of them. So there's actually a really interesting case during the Nuremberg trials where a German U-boat shot down attacked or hit a Greek merchant marine vessel. I think it was in 1943. And the submarine commander ordered them to surface, and there were still people like clinging to the wreckage, and the Nazis just gunned them and grenaded them down. And the captain was shot, and 2 officers were executed at Nuremberg. And that was kind of the precedent for what we're looking at right now. So they are definitely very worried about this. Obviously, like you can't do double tap or triple tap strikes. I would like to point out the absolute moral hypocrisy, though, of all these defense Dems, like Senator Mark Kelly and Miss CIA, Senator Slotnick, about like calling out the illegality of these of this order. They're kind of using it as this like lever to pressure the Trump administration, say they're so immoral, but they were also completely silent during a triple tap strike on the World Central Kitchen convoy in Gaza last year. So this is a political stunt, and they're not even using it. The Democratic establishment is so politically incapable of any action, mostly because like Hakeem Jeffries is like divorced dad energy. If it was a person, he said that he's not going to pursue, any sort of like legal action or inquest against Pete Hegseth over this, but they are definitely concerned. What I've discussed and what I'm definitely very worried about is that governments, especially allied governments, learn from each other. And what has Israel been able to do? They've been able to, as a matter of state policy, normalize the bombing of hospitals for modern warfare going forward forever. Because warfare is a lot like law in terms of like you need to be very conscious about what precedents are set and what precedents are allowed to be set. So that, like the impunity of Israeli action, the impunity of Israeli intervention throughout West Asia over the past 2 years is basically informing our own impunity, trying to gin up like consent for engagement in Nigeria on the faulty premise of a Christian genocide. ISIS in Somalia, we just, as a matter of coincidence, want to install 5 military bases in Somalia to strategically challenge the power of the Houthis in the Red Sea. And we're apparently going back to Afghanistan. But what we're seeing is, this new age of impunity, and no one really wants to stop it. All these defense Dems are just trying to win political points and be like, see, Trump and Pete Hegseth, they're doing war wrong. Like, we're not really going to push back against like intervention in Venezuela. We're just going to be like, hey, you can still kill people, just don't like kill them in the wrong way. This is exactly like the message that they're setting. But the administration, it's interesting to see, is like they still are concerned about the rule of law and consequences going forward for this. So this is going to be a developing story, and it's actually not going to go away.
Yeah, as it shouldn't go away. I mean, it's crazy to hear you use the term, by the way, triple strike. I never thought I'd hear that. But yeah, when you're talking about the Israelis killing those health kitchen workers, but man, a triple strike. But I also appreciate, Greg, that you're making this. What you're essentially saying when you talk about what's been done in the Middle East and West Asia, and now seeing it done in the Caribbean, it's like you couldn't have the current effort to basically kill people extrajudicially on small fishing boats in the Caribbean and surrounding Venezuela militarily the way we have, without the kind of raising the threshold of cruelty and imperial aggression in the Middle East, West Asia over the last 20 years, but especially since the genocide in Gaza. And I want to ask you to comment or your reaction to one of the justifications that we're hearing, because it's kind of amazing. They're not even denying what they did. They're just saying it was excusable. So I want to play a clip. I think it's from ABC News, if I'm not mistaken, of the way the media is participating in some war propaganda here.
And tonight, new information. According to a source familiar with the incident, the 2 survivors climbed back onto the boat after the initial strike. They were believed to be potentially in communication with others and salvaging some of the drugs. Because of that, it was determined they were still in the fight and valid targets. A JAG officer was also giving legal advice. So again, David, that video will be key, and Admiral Bradley will be on the Hill tomorrow behind closed doors.
Just inexcusable. That is not journalism. But go ahead, Greg.
No, it's kind of funny. One of the things that kind of radicalized me into being like an anti-war activist, anti-imperialist activist journalist, because anti-war is a really milquetoast, lame, ineffectual position, was actually sitting in tactical operations centers in Afghanistan during the Obama administration. And I wasn't plugged into the kinetic strike targeting cycle, which is basically collecting intelligence, determining the target, shooting the target, essentially with a missile. Very reductive in terms of process. But all these strikes had to be cleared by JAG officers. They all had to be rubber stamped because of the institutionalized racism within the military itself and how information and intelligence is collected. Like, we knew that we were hitting people that should not have been hit by like the parameters of were they involved with the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, or like ISIS in the Khorasan. No, because they, like, when it comes to these intelligence echo chambers, like, I have a background in human intelligence collection where I would like talk to people on the ground and you call it like tactical questioning. I'd write up a report and say like, this guy is affiliated with the Taliban. What does that actually mean? And then the intelligence analyst who's like sifting through all this data from different sources will see Taliban affiliate and be like, okay, this is someone who needs to get struck. Send it up to JAG, Judge Advocate General. The judge sees, oh, Taliban affiliate. Yeah, what does that actually mean? And so like there was this completely institutional thing of just like ascribing guilt with no actionable intelligence behind it. And we are seeing the same thing play out here. Like, where's the accountability? Like, who are these people that were actually striking? Like, one of the drug boats, quote unquote drug boats that they struck early on, kinetically, had 11 people on it. That's not a drug running boat. Like, it's 2 guys for security and one guy at the helm for navigation. Like, everybody knows that. So, and also this part, they usually generally use the Pacific anyway. So it kind of makes obviously no sense. We know what's going on here. But yeah, it's just kind of reminding me of like what we've already done and normalized over the past 20 years, but now we're not even like hiding it anymore. I do appreciate the mask off moment, but I'm still like shocked that we're kind of like sleepwalking our way into Iraq 2.0, and there's no pushback from either party, which just goes to show that, that like U.S. foreign policy and imperialism is bipartisan. I saw your segment before about, bringing up Hillary Clinton. She's definitely behind the scenes, definitely pushing for this. And, we're brushing over like a re-engagement with Afghanistan as well. So it's like full speed ahead with all these interventions. And of course, it's been enabled and normalized by what's happened in Gaza. All of these things are connected. And yeah, here we are.
No, I think it's an incredibly good point. And I mean, Obama, last thing he does on the way out of the door, of course, is ramp up tensions against Venezuela. I remember the first Biden campaign in 2020, in Florida, all the Biden people had these shirts they were making that were anti-Maduro shirts to show like, we too are anti-communist and hate anything that seems good in Latin America. Like, don't confuse the Democrats with anything there. But let me just ask you this, just to speak to that point as well, Greg, before we let you go. I know coming up this Saturday, there's going to be demonstrations all around the United States against a war in Venezuela. There does seem to be a ramp up into War on Terror 2.0. I mean, from your perspective, how important is it for people who are like sitting there, the 70% of people who say they don't want something like this to happen, to actually leave their homes and stand up and be counted?
Oh, I definitely want to try to like reframe like the narrative around this is like all of these imperial wars are actually like transnational wars upon the working class. Like there is nothing that this government has to offer you, like 300 billion between like Ukraine, Israel and Argentina, over the past few years. And you can't get healthcare. You can't get anything. America is not a rich country. There's just a country with a lot of rich people in it, and you're not one of them. And I definitely think that it's paramount now that people are starting to like wake up, especially in the wake of Gaza, and they're starting to learn about how U.S. foreign policy is actually done. That like there is no daylight between like the war state and the police state and the national security state here at home. There are our forever wars are now coming home in the way of, in the form of ICE, and people are talking about like migration as this major issue. I live in a border state. I'm in Texas. It's a huge issue here, and we would like to bring up like if migration, and this is where I kind of like get people on the more political right kind of on board with this anti-interventionist attitude. It's already there, but for a lot of different reasons. But like, where do you think all of these Venezuelans are going to go in the wake of a regime change operation and civil war? I mean, I grew up like working back of house, with a bunch of like Guatemalans who all had to flee to Texas after, we implemented like death squads in the 80s. It's going to be like the same thing. And there are already like U.S. Special Operations Forces and CIA ground branch coming over from Colombia into Venezuela to try to recruit paramilitaries right now. Like we know it's happening. So yeah, we're all connected by what we do, and whatever violence we do overseas always comes back home almost immediately. And I'm hoping people are starting to realize that, and whatever money or regional or strategic dominance, we'll be able to extract from Venezuela, you will never see that. It will not improve your life at all.